welcome back to some sort of the Cooler Jets podcast. We're Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. I know we've been promising it for a while. Honestly, probably over a year now. We've been saying we're going to have Joe Blewett on soon. But last week we were pretty concrete. We're going to have Joe Blewett on. We're going to talk about some of these draft prospects. Jets X Factors, resident film guy. Blewett, how you doing, man?
I'm proud of you guys for doing 2 episodes in a row. Is it a new milestone for you guys? So on to episode 3, hopefully next week.
Yeah, I know. We could be a little flaky. It's always like around January, February, March, like, especially after this year, which was just so heartbreaking. I think Michael and I both felt it a lot in January and February. Like, we don't want to talk about this team. But then, then they started making some free agent moves, and now we're back in.
Like fair weather fans. Got it.
All right, fair weather fans. We've had this pod for 5. Nanny has never seen a single good season outside of 2015. Because he started watching 2011s when he really got into it. Yeah. It's like he hasn't seen at least they sucked me in like 2008, 2009, 2010. Like I was like, all right, this is really fun. And then that like little taste of glory has just held me for like 15 years, whatever it's been. Mm-hmm. So I don't think, Nanny's writing like reviews of BJ Bellows special teams coverage a couple years ago. I mean, come on. The fair weather accusations off the bat.
I could say that I also started podcasting. I think it was actually a little bit before 2015. It might have been like 13 or 14, but the last couple of years have been tough. It's hard to break down film of Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold, Trevor Siemian and all that stuff. But you as a part of the website, you got to do it. So it is what it is. Some people grind, some people don't, Ben. It's okay.
You've been on the grind because I've outsourced all of my draft takes to your reviews, which I think anybody should check out on the Jets X Factor YouTube, or you got to subscribe if you want to see some of the longer form ones on like Latham, and some of them are behind the paywall. But If you go to Jets X Factor YouTube, you can see Blewett. You've done Adunze, Bowers, Fuanga, Fashanu, Latham. I don't think you've done Fatanu. But yeah, very informative. Obviously, get into the details of these prospects, and I feel a lot better about my knowledge base on these prospects after watching you, as opposed to just like listening to like a YouTube mock draft where they just read the scouting report off of NFL.com. I feel like I have a better sense of these guys, and I really want to get into the offensive tackles, because anybody who listened to our last podcast, which by the way, I mean, I think Michael and I titled it on YouTube, like, why the Jets need to avoid Brock. But I gave it a very clickbaity title. And then Michael made the thumbnail with the red arrow and like avoid. And it worked because we had a lot of comments. Most of them were negative. But we can get into Bowers first. And the whole point of that podcast, we didn't really even talk that much about Bowers as a player, which I wanted to do with you. It was more about like why I think the Jets need to take an offensive tackle at 10. And we can get into that discussion. When you're taking a guy, like this is what Michael and I were kind of saying, is like the 3 things you look at. Like there's the need, there's the fit, and then there's the value. And the value is the most important part. And that was the part that I felt like, and we can get into that, why they should take an offensive tackle, how tight ends take a little bit longer to develop. One of these guys gets injured, you're back to where you were last year. The need part of it, it's like, it's not a huge need for the Jets, but it's not, Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert isn't something to dissuade you from taking a top tight end. And then the fit is pretty good. And Michael, you can get into that a little bit, but I want to hear your breakdown on Brock Bowers. I did watch your review, and you had some things that I know a lot of people on Twitter are trying to dispute in terms of like the ball tracking and the contested catching and stuff. But like, let's just start with the good, because there is a chance for the Jets take him, and we're all going to have to backpedal and get our Brock Bowers jerseys. At least I will. So let's start with the good with Bowers. Why should Jets fans be excited if they take him?
Yeah, and I don't know if Nania's reason for him like fitting into the offense is because Rodgers likes to get rid of the ball quickly, and obviously when you have a guy like Bowers who gets really good yak, he gets rid of the ball quickly in the flat, then he could pick up that yak. So that's probably where you're talking about in terms of Bowers really fitting into this offense, which would be interesting. And I think that is a positive to him. Rodgers is a guy who likes to go vertical. If he's not going vertical, he's going to go horizontal. Flats, quick throws like that, and Bowers can obviously take advantage of that. Now, can Bowers take advantage of it versus guys like CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams, Fred Warner, as compared to some guy from Yale? That's obviously still yet to be seen. I think it will translate. He is a savage in terms of the having the ball in his hands. So he offers that. He offers good athleticism in terms of like how just his fluidity, how quick he is, his acceleration, his deep ends or his deep speed's good. You like the physicality that he has. You like that in pass protection, he's pretty sound in terms of at least his technique. I don't think he's NFL ready in terms of NFL strength in terms of like pass blocking at the end one-on-one. If he's going to chip a guy, if he's going to assist the tackle, I'm fine with him in that role. But if you're going to ask him to like specifically block at the end one-on-one, either in the pass game or in the run game, you're mistaken there. He's not big enough for it yet, even though he does have the technique. So if he does get stronger, then okay, then he could do that. So he offers really good yak. He offers really good upside in blocking. He offers really good upside in terms of his, in terms of his just how physical he is, in terms of his the mindset that he has running with the ball after he catches it. And then also you have the physical upside of just his body and the fact that he is a little bit raw as a route runner, but if he rounds it out, his explosion and his acceleration, he could be a really top-notch route runner. But he still has a long way to go there. In terms of like the backpedaling with Bowers, it's not a thing where not me personally, I'm not gonna have to backpedal because like it is what it is. I put out my feelings out there, and you watch the review, Ben. I never said like Bowers cannot be a good player. Like I did not say that. I said that I think Bowers could be a good player, but I have a lot of questions about Bowers. I have a question about his deep, which we'll talk about. I have questions about him. So it wasn't a thing where I was watching him. I'm like, okay, negative. How can everybody draft this guy? It was more question. Because I didn't see him versus press coverage. I didn't see him. Nania wrote the article. Was it 48% Nania that he caught the ball behind the line of scrimmage? And I don't know if that counts. What about 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 yards? So that might be a large chunk of them as well because he was involved in the screening game and all of that with Georgia, and that's really how they schemed him up. So for me with Bowers, it's like, yeah, he has a lot of physical upside, but there was just a ton of question marks about his film, and I think he could be a good prospect. But people are talking about this guy like he's the next Kyle Pitts. He's some absolute stud. He's going to be George Kittle. He's going to be Travis Kelce. And I want to push back on that. It's like we have a lot of questions here. He could be that player, or he could just be another guy. So am I willing to take that at 10? Maybe it kind of depends on how the board falls. But like you said, Conklin I think is probably an underrated receiving tight end in the NFL. I think he's a top 10 receiving tight end. I'm not saying overall tight end, but receiving tight end. And that's come to fruition in terms of like the numbers the last 2 years. I think he was like 6 and 8 this year, maybe in receiving. And that's with Simeon and a bunch of scrub quarterbacks. So with Aaron Rodgers, you figure he'd be better. But then past that, Jeremy Ruckert, realistically, yeah, good story, Long Island kid, but does anybody else really know him from the NFL? No, like he's a Jag, let's be honest at this point. He has a lot to prove, but realistically, if he was on another team, we'd have no idea who he was. Because
Year 3.
Again, yeah, but he hasn't proven anything. Like if he was on the Rams, we'd have no idea who he was. So I don't think he's going to preclude you from taking a guy. And with Bowers too, like I understand the argument for the pro Bowers people. He's not just a tight end. So he could be in the slot and crack linebackers and safeties and stuff like that. You can call him a receiver. And if you're in 11 personnel, okay, he's a receiver. And then you have Mike Williams out there with Garrett Wilson and then Conklin. So like he could play that receiver role. And I'm sure that he would dip into Alan Lazard's numbers and stuff like that. So I don't think it's a thing where like, oh, he's a tight end, we're not going to play 12 personnel enough for him. So I think that's kind of an unfair argument for the anti-Bowers people. But there is positive in terms of physical upside. It's just there's a ton of questions marks as well. So.
Yeah, Nanny, I don't know if you wrote that article this week about kind of like the fit and why that part of Bowers, and we can get into the negative. I mean, you touched on the negatives a little bit. There's more we can get into before we talk about the offensive tackles and some other stuff. But I know you wrote that article about the fit this week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm overall against it, like you and I both discussed on our last episode. But I mean, the only I think saving grace would be I do like the fit because Aaron Rodgers in recent years has relied very heavily on yak. You look back to 2021 when he won his last MVP, and he had the 4th highest percentage of his passing yards that were from yards after the catch. So he'll take his shots, but I think especially now at his age and coming off his injury, and considering how he was already becoming more of like a quick passing pocket quarterback the past few years, yak is going to be a huge part of the Jets offense. And they have 2 really good yak guys with Garrett and Breece Hall, but that's really it right now. They don't have any other like good yak players. So you put Bowers in there, I think he could fit right away. But, I mean, ultimately, for me, it's just the value of the 10th pick is what it comes down to. Because, like, how many tight ends per year play at the level to, you consider valuable enough to be a 10th overall pick or on par with the receiver you hope to get with that pick? Because that's the same pick you got Garrett Wilson and Devontae Smith over the past few years. 2 guys who are, yearly 1,000-yard receivers and should only get better. There aren't many. It's like you have Travis Kelce, you have George Kittle, Mark Andrews. Those are probably your guys in the league right now. Maybe you could put Hawkinson in there. But other than that, it's like a top 5 to 10 tight end is like the 30th to 40th receiver. It's just not as valuable of a position. And even a lot of those guys who do get to that level, a lot of them aren't even first round picks. When you're talking about Kelce, Kittle, Andrews, even Gronk, most of these guys aren't. When you look at the first round tight ends, most of them don't come close to that level. I mean, Hawkinson is about as good as it's gotten for first round tight ends in the past decade. And he had a really good season the past year. He was at 960 yards and 5 touchdowns. But his first few years, he was just putting up Tyler Conklin numbers. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I just, the positional value isn't there for me. And like Blewett said, I don't think Bowers is quite, generational enough to the point where like he's a slam dunk. He's going to be that type of guy who's so good to the point where he could overcome the positional value and give you what you would get out of a 10th overall pick. But with that being said, I do like the fit to an extent. So it wouldn't be a terrible pick. It's probably my least favorite of the options, but I don't think it would be atrocious. It's just a matter of, in the end, is he going to do as much as, what some of these other players might do at tackle or receiver? Will he provide as much impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think people get excited about it. Like 2-time Mackey Award winner, he has this buzz and hype around him as being like a generational type of tight end prospect. He's a guy you can get, you buy his jersey, whatever. I think fans want to see something exciting at pick 10. But there's also the thing, like, and I don't know if you feel this way, Blewett, and you can get into some more of the negatives with him. But sometimes, like, especially with Bowers, who's a little undersized, I think people see him as like a bit of a unicorn at tight end in college because he's so fast and he brings that yak ability. But sometimes those unicorns in college get to the NFL and it's like, okay, well, now everybody else around you is a little bit faster. So now you're just an undersized tight end who's pretty fast. And I think regardless, I think the yak is going to translate because I do think that at the very least, you can see it in his film. I mean, you can touch on this a little bit more, but I think you can see in his film that the yak part of his game is going to translate. But then you talk about him as like an inline blocker, like that needs a lot of work. There are some deficiencies in his route running and his ball tracking that you can talk about as well, where it's like, all right, well, this is a good yak tight end, but is that worth the 10th overall pick? And so the player itself, we talked about the value last week. We talked about the fit a little bit and the need, but the player itself, what are some of the big cons that are the red flags to you in terms of like why this guy isn't a tight end worth taking at 10?
Yeah, and if he was like a physical freak like Kyle Pitts, like if this was Kyle Pitts, I would take him at 10. Like if it was the same prospect, if Kyle Pitts was Bowers, I'd be completely fine with taking him at 10. I'd probably sign the dotted line for Kyle Pitts at 10. I know it hasn't necessarily worked out, and I think he actually had 1,000 yards in his rookie year. But however, Arthur Smith has operated that offense. Obviously, didn't really take advantage of his best weapons. But for me, and I know that people say that, and I will watch his last season, not his last season, but his last season if he is drafted to the Jets, because a lot of people talk about him being better in terms of his numbers, in terms of contested catches. Yeah, okay, but still, whatever the last year was that he put up a bunch of contested catches, I gotta watch that if he is drafted, because I want to see exactly how he's winning those, because it wasn't even a thing where I was watching his contested catches, which he, again, I said, and this isn't an actual number, but it felt like he caught like 1 out of 10, maybe 2 out of 10, which isn't obviously a great number, but it wasn't a thing where I was watching him and I was like, oh, he's just unlucky that it didn't land. Like, I didn't like his technique in terms of boxing guys out, using physicality at the catch point, basically pushing guys to attack the ball. I didn't really see that. He kind of let guys like dominate him a little bit at the catch point. So even if it is better, how much better is it? Like, to me, it's not necessarily about the results, it's about the process, and his process wasn't even good in those. So yeah, he got a bad result, but it was also a bad process. So I'd be curious to go back and watch those, and I will if he is drafted. But that's a massive question for me in terms of, he could take the top off the defense. He's great. Yeah, he could take the top off the defense in terms of like him versus a linebacker. He can outrun that guy. But in terms of like going up and get the ball, I have a lot of questions about that. I really didn't see it much at all last year, if at all. The one catch he made was a one-handed back shoulder, which was a nice catch, but again, not something that's necessarily replicatable. And then in terms of the other questions, it's again, he's he's physical, but he's not a freak. Like, he doesn't have the best vertical. He's 6'4", 241. Kyle Pitts is a little bit bigger than him. I know Sam Laporta and some of those guys have some similar measurables, but it's not like he's Gronkowski. Like, he's not that big. The route running, like you said in the review, needs some work. So there's in terms of like his commitment to stop steps, his commitment to breaks. Nani put in the article that, about 50% of his stuff was schemed open. And I didn't see him. I don't know if I saw him once beat press, at the collegiate level last year at Georgia. So what happens when a safety presses him? Is he able to get off that press coverage? And then you also have a problem in terms of him running in terms of him deep down the field. And I showed it in the review at least twice. I know the sun was in his eyes one time and people lost their minds, and that's how they'll defend him, as the sun in his eyes. That's fine. You'll be like the guy Luke on Twitter who made like 3 or 4 different accounts just to combat my Bauer stuff because I keep blocking him. But he struggles tracking the ball too. And like, you'll have the freeze frame scouters who, like, they'll screenshot the ball being over his head and it's like, oh, how do you expect Bowers to catch that? And I explain it in the review. It's like, if your quarterback is eyeing you down the sideline and you're running 95% speed, let's say for sake of it, it's 20 miles per hour. He is throwing to 20 miles per hour. He's anticipating, okay, when the ball gets there, 20 miles per hour, math, all that shit. When you slow down to 10 to track the ball and it's an overthrow, that's the tight end's fault. That's the receiver's fault. Now you're expected to slow down a little bit. You could lose, like, you can go from 100 and just the mechanical process of turning your head. Typically guys are going to slow down from maybe 100 to 98, but you're not going from 100 to 50. And that's what Bowers did sometimes, tracking the ball. So he struggles to track the ball. I would say his hands are average. He can't. He contested catches situations were few and far between, and when they were out there, he did not win them. Not great at the catch point in terms of those contested catches. No press coverage, schemed open. So like, we're banking on this guy to be Debo, and there's only one Debo. So can he be that? Yes, sure, he could be, or maybe like a poor man's version of Debo. Like, I could see a world where he is very valuable. It's just not a bet I'm willing to take at 10 with all the questions I have about his game. And then on top of that too, his size, he's a move blocker. Like, he's not an inline blocker like I described. So he could be that in a year or 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. He could develop into that. But if you're asking to block a D on one-on-one, that's a mistake. But yeah, he has a physicality. He has a good blocking technique. So he's taking on a linebacker or safety. I can see that being possible, even though there are some linebackers at the NFL level who would blow him up. So can he add that size? Does he lose that physicality or his, like, his speed and stuff if he gains that size? So there's a ton of questions I have about him as a prospect.
Yeah, and like, look, I don't think we're not just necessarily shitting on Brock Bowers. I think it's just important because I think a lot of people get swept into like the media buzz. Like, all right, well, this guy was great in college, 2-time Mackey Award winner, generational tight end. Let's just take him. But then when you dive into the prospect, like you said, it's not necessarily that he can't develop into a George Kittle type of tight end. It's just there are question marks. And the one thing I will say, like, in defense of Bowers, is that because you watch the 2023 season, he got hurt, I think, in the Auburn game, and he had to have surgery on his ankle, and then he returned 2 weeks later, which was like record. It was supposed to be a 4 to 6 week injury. Scouts wanted him to just sit out for the rest of the year, and he came back. And I wonder if that affected some of the stuff you'll see, like his vertical jump or whatever, and stuff like, because I don't think he did it at the combine. So like, yeah, like there are
Which that's another question, by the way, Ben. Another big question. I'll bring it up on the review. The one play he jumps for the ball and he clears all of 2 inches. Like,
the reason I say that is because I think that was the first game. I could be wrong, but I think that was the Tennessee game. I forget exactly which game it was, but I think it was one of the first games back. Which is the only reason I say that. But like, yeah, I agree. Like, when you were breaking down like some of the parts of his game that, like, I'll be honest, like a layman like myself would watch on game day on Saturday and be like, wow, that was a great play by Bowers. And then you break it down, it's like, well, there's some like things at the top of his route, or like, just the ball tracking, like, is really the big one, where it's like on the broadcast angle, you see, it's like, look at the catch he would have had to make. This crazy one-handed catch was way over his head. Like, what type of throw is that? And then you see the all 22 angle, and it's like, well, when the QB throws it, he's expecting him to be a certain spot, and then him slowing down just makes it like a way crazier, way more difficult catch. So yeah, and then that doesn't even touch on any of the stuff we talked about in the last podcast, which is like why I think the Jets need to take an offensive tackle, which I think we can get into a little bit. And like, let me just ask you a little bit about like your draft philosophy, because like every time in January, actually I'll say this, every time after the draft, the first thing I say is we're not going to make this mistake next year. The draft is not a shopping list for needs. They're just going to take the best player available on their board, because the draft is just about getting the best guys, the best young guys in these 4 to 5 year contracts to be the building blocks of your team. And so the Jets, they've done a nice job of patching up all their holes where they can go wherever. And if they're sitting there at 10 and they have their third best, Bowers is number 4 on their big board, it's like they're going to take him. What's like your philosophy though? Because like for me, I think it's dumb to ignore that the situation at offensive tackle where it's like, okay, maybe it's not a need. Maybe this guy's technically a backup, but it's very much a need when you have 2 offensive tackles in their 30s on 1-year deals, both with injury issues. And you have a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. When you look at the numbers, and Nania tweeted out the photo of his article from last year, where it's like, when you look at Rodgers with time in the pocket, he's like the best quarterback. He was the best quarterback in football versus under pressure, middle of the pack to below average under pressure. And now he's coming off an Achilles injury. And it's like you also have, one of the best running backs in all of football behind him who's had just utter shit in front of him. And it's like, oh, well, you could also help him out with this pick as well. So like that was all last week's podcast. We don't have to get too much into it. But like your draft philosophy, like are you very strictly like best player on the board, or are you kind of taking into account some of the other things, especially in a win now year and a 40-year-old quarterback?
Yeah, I want to raise one more question about Bowers too. Just to throw this in there, just because I'm not going to ask it necessarily. It's more rhetorical. It's tight ends take a little bit to develop. We only have maybe a year or 2 with Rodgers. So that's something else that you want to consider. But in terms of philosophy, I'm and it depends on the round. Obviously, like later on, I like to take guys who are either like physical freaks who are really raw, or guys who are kind of like who have been injured. You're just betting on them, magically finding health. But that's later on. I'm typically a best player available at a position of need guy. But then the problem comes in, like define a position of need for the Jets this year. And I get people who are saying, okay, tackle, and the tackle is going to play, let's say 6 or 7 games. I think I said on one
like way more.
6 okay. Well, you have Tyron Smith who plays like 13 games. So let's say like 4 there, and then Moses is going to miss 2 or 3. So I would say the over under would be like 6.5, 7, 7.5, something like that.
Okay.
So,
but AVT, he's played 12 games in 2 years.
Yeah, true.
So
but it also depends on the tackle that you're going to grab too. Right. Because if it's JC Latham, I don't think you're just going to say JC Latham and say, hey, you're just playing guard now. Like it's not necessarily fair to do that to prospects. So I think if you draft most of those guys, they're just going to be at tackle. You're not going to really move them around.
All right, keep going. Sorry. Well, I was going to say Latham is one of those guys that some people do project inside as a guard, and when we can talk about him, but whatever. But yeah, like Fatanu's like the one guy that you really could be like, all right, you're starting over John Simpson, and then if there's an injury, you're going to slide around.
Yeah.
He's the one out of the top 4 that you feel like you can do that.
But in general, it's like, okay, this guy is probably going to play like 35% of the reps. So do you want to take that in a win year or in a win now year where, let's say, Rome Odunze is going to play 70% of the reps, especially considering that Mike Williams might miss the first couple of weeks and is even going to be healthy? Because if he's not healthy, you have Lazard as your 2, and that's a freaking problem, and we all know that. So
but do you agree with me that it's easier for Rodgers to overcome throwing to Jason Brownlee and Xavier Gibson at receiver than it is for him to overcome Max Mitchell blocking from him?
But you're also assuming that if they don't draft a tackle, or they don't get if they don't get a guy at 10 or they don't get a guy at 72, that Bakhtiari, all those guys are not out there. Because the other question is, okay, well, let's say it is a Bakhtiari. Let's say it's I don't think Illuminor's out there, but there's another guy out there, McGovern, whoever it is. Like, how much better is, let's say, Troy Fatanu in year 1 than, and again, this guy sucks, we know that, but how much better is he really than a Donovan Smith, where I think that, the step up from Odunze to Lazard is maybe a little bit more drastic. And obviously Donovan Smith's not like necessarily my first option. I'm sure there's guys out there who are at least okay. But if you were to get one of those guys, it's not like if we don't draft a tackle, then it's Carter Warren, because then yes, let's draft a tackle. But I don't think that's kind of real life. I think they will bring in somebody else if it's not going to be a tackle. So then the argument comes, okay, well, do you want the guy again 35% of the reps who might be a better prospect versus a guy who might be a little bit lower of a prospect but is going to play a lot more? And in a year, let's say we were the 2020 Jets and we knew we were going to lose this year, then hey, yeah, let's grab that tackle 100% because we don't have a guy going into the future. But if I told you right now, like, hey, Super Bowl roster, the Jets trade, or let's say they don't even trade down, they just take Fashanu at 10. Fashanu's on the bench in the Super Bowl, most likely, if everybody's healthy. Rome Odunze is playing 65% of the reps. So in a Super Bowl or bust year, I get wanting the weapon over the offensive lineman. The offensive lineman is the smart move. It's thinking with your head. It's going to the future. But in terms of like putting us over the top, getting a receiver may actually do that for the Jets. Okay. So long term versus short term. What pushes over the top?
Quick retort though. You're not getting to the Super Bowl, though, if Tyron Smith gets injured and you don't have anybody behind. And, like, I understand what you're saying. Like, okay, maybe Bakhtiari slides in and whatnot. But I just look, first of all, if they're in the Super Bowl and Fashanu's on the bench, and you're like, all right, well, he's got to sit behind Tyron Smith for a year. You feel pretty good about his development. I get the argument, and if everything goes according to plan and everything goes perfectly, and that offensive tackle only sees a third of the, only plays a third of the time, then it's like, all right, well, yeah, maybe in a vacuum 1 year, maybe it would have been better to take the receiver. But I'm a Jets fan, and I know that things aren't going to go according to plan. What do they have? 15 different offensive linemen play last year. I'm pretty confident this guy's going to play more games than not. And like, I think that is the benefit to a guy like Fatanu is like, well, he can play if AVT goes down. He can play if John Simpson went down. You feel like you can kind of slide him around the line, and maybe you don't feel that way about, definitely not about Fashanu because he only played left tackle. But Latham, some people think can play guard. We could talk about him individually as a player. But like, for me, it's like, it's the impact of if they have a catastrophic offensive line injury, whether it's week 2 or week 17, it can completely derail their season, where it's like Aaron Rodgers with time in the pocket. I trust him to be able to get the ball to Tyler Conklin and Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. And if he's throwing to Irvin Charles or Jason Brownlee, I still feel like he'll be able to move the ball because you have this amazing defense. The thing that he won't be able to overcome is a guy right in his face right off the bat. Like we saw in every play he had last year. Like it was just somebody in his face immediately. And like you said, yes, they could sign David Bakhtiari. They could also sign Odell Beckham Jr., who we know wants to play with Aaron Rodgers. And like, I know you're not huge on that, but like they could still draft a receiver in round 3. This is a great tackle class. And you're talking about a league that has a dearth of good offensive linemen. And we can get into these guys right now individually, but it's like consensus is this is one of the best offensive tackle classes in a while. And you never know because the 2021 QB class was one of the best QB classes
every year. It's the best. It's the best of the worst class. There's there's no gray area.
But you look at like how many offensive linemen are going to go in the top 15? How many offensive linemen are going to go in the first round? Like this is your time to go and get a blue chip offensive lineman. And Joe Douglas, that's the last thing. And then Michael, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but like Joe Douglas with his back against the wall, his ass is on the hot seat. The former offensive lineman preached about building up the trenches. Like, what do we think he's going to do with his back against the wall? I think he's going to take the offensive lineman because that's the thing that will sink the Jets season more than anything else. So that's where my head's at. Like I'm thinking with the big head, everybody else is thinking with the little head. They want to get a Dunze, they want to get Bowers, but for me, it's just like that's the thing that'll ruin the season. So it's like anything they can do to help that, take the best offensive line, and they might have their pick of the litter outside of Alt. I think they probably will because I think 4 QBs are going to go, 3 receivers are probably going to go, and then 1 other player. So it could be an offensive tackle, it could be the best and like this is all conjecture, but like just when you look at the big boards and team needs.
I think Rome could be there. I don't think he's Rome some absolute could be there, lock.
But is he getting past the Bears at 9? Like when the Falcons get in the board at 8, maybe a team moves. I don't know. But anyways, Michael, I don't know if you want to jump in if you have any thoughts. I know you're.
I was going to ask Blewett. Like when you're looking at offensive linemen, and you've had a pretty decent success rate, I would say, or pretty good success rate recent years. I know you were all over Evan Neal with him busting. That one comes to mind immediately, but I know in general you've been pretty good. So like not even thinking about like the Jets scheme this year, like what this team needs, just offensive line scouting in general, specifically talking about draft prospects. What are the main things you're looking at in terms of just trying to get the best idea of how they're going to transfer to the league?
I really like mentality. One, I think that's something that Joe Douglas has lacked in the last couple of years. I actually liked one of his first picks, Cam Clark, in terms of his mentality. Carter Warren, Max Mitchell, I thought they were soft in college and they continue to be soft at the NFL level. So that's one thing. Necessary athleticism, lateral ability, explosion out of the snap. The ability to redirect, things like that. Obviously, can you just hold up at the NFL level? Hand placement. There's really a lot. It's really a large pool, but to like bake it to boil it down to 3 things, I would say mindset, just overall technique, in terms of like their, again, hand placement, things like that. And then it usually goes into scheme fit. But it's a really large, it's honestly a hard question to answer because there's not like necessarily one thing. Necessary athleticism is definitely obviously something you look for. And that's something that I think actually some of them struggle with. And then the mindset thing is something that I struggle with, like watching guys and they don't have that mindset. I just don't see how they're going to start, manhandling guys who are 30 years old with kids, at the NFL level. So there's things that, those are definitely some things I look into. And then in terms of like Ben, what you were saying, it's more about like, it's philosophy. If you think that the Jets could overcome getting overcome the lack of receivers with Odell, with Boyd, whoever it may be, then that's how you feel. I really don't think there's a right answer. I'm kind of split. At 10, I'm thinking, okay, it's probably going to be tackle. That's where I'm falling. But I get the people who want Bowers or Odunze. It's more about, again, philosophy. And do you think that piece could push us over the edge? Where, again, in an ideal scenario, you have a guy like Fashanu on the bench, and then again, you bring in Bakhtiari, you bring in whoever. How much different are they, or how much worse are they than a rookie who's going to be on the bench for most of the year? I would take. You're telling me right now, hey, one game, Bakhtiari in the Super Bowl or Fashanu, I'm taking Bakhtiari. In that Super Bowl. Now, hopefully, it doesn't go out at halftime with an injury, but nonetheless, it's more about philosophy. And then, the offensive line question. That's something I'm going to think about now, Nania. And I'm going to shoot you a message on Slack.
Well, okay, so because I kind of want to get into that as well. Like, if we're gonna, because I was originally like, and we still can do this, where it's like you've come out with your offensive tackle rankings, but I kind of wanted to have like and in my layman's terms, I put together 5 categories right here, and we can adjust it. But then I kind of want to rank these guys. So like, and we can adjust this, but like I like the mindset, and if we can go through and rank them. But like the 5 categories I had was mindset, anchor, hands and pass protection, feet, and then I said drive and run game, because I wanted to have something like in the run game, but we can maybe change this. But like I think mindset, anchor, hands are all good. You wanted to include like athleticism. I used feet, because like lateral movement, quickness, and whatnot. But we can change that if you want. But if we're gonna rank these guys, what would you think the other 2 categories would be?
Well, you said we said mindset, we said athleticism.
Anchor, hands and pass protection. We'll use athleticism, and then one more. We're like drive in the run game, like playing with leverage.
I would say leverage and hand placement in the run game is huge. And then also being able to like drive off your insteps in the run game. You have a lot of guys who scoop from low. It's most of the problems in run game are either scooping from low, wide hands, or driving off of your toes, or lack of drive at all. And that's the problem I actually see with Alt in terms of his run game. So yeah, if you want to boil it down to 5, I would say something similar to that. I also think in terms of like, the tackles and guards, it's really about, can you recover from really shitty spots? And that's why a lot of like wrestlers make really good offensive linemen, because you're in shitty spots often as a wrestler. Yeah. And that's why Wirfs was a really good prospect in terms of like, hey, he has that ability to, and Tippmann actually has this ability to have like flexibility to recover from really, really odd spots. And again, that's some problems I have with some of the other offensive linemen in this class, Fuaga. There's 5 though. I think that's fine.
So I grew up in Oregon, and my childhood best friend, he had season tickets to Oregon State games. So I grew up I was like, dang, this number 7 guy was Brandon Cooks. I was like, this guy's gonna be amazing in the NFL. And I wanted him, and then they took Calvin Pryor. So
I like him a lot.
Never again will I want to pass on a beef.
I specifically remember like a highlight of Brandon Cooks like on the sideline where he gets like tackled by 2 guys and like kind of like falls down to the ground off a guy's back and like spins out and runs for a touchdown. I still remember that. But listen, like Carter Warren is from Brooklyn, but I still don't like his game, so it is what it is.
All right. So let's go through and rank some of these guys. I guess we can start with let's start with the mindset. I think that's a good place to start. If we can run through some of these guys if we want to get like more into like Latham, Fuaga, whatever. Also, like I know, because I've been saying it Fuaga, and then like 3 weeks ago or whatever, I was listening to a podcast and I kept saying Fuaga, and then I looked it up and it is Fuaga, and I know you were confused by that as well. I think it's a silent N. I don't know where it is, but okay, Fuaga. But if we're gonna rank them by mindset, how do you see? And I already know who's number 1's gonna be, but how do you see 2, 3, and 4 between Latham, Fashanu, Fuaga, and Fatanu? And Alt, we're just going to assume is gone.
So the thing I will preface this is that I watched Fatanu in passing, so it's not a thing like I didn't do a legitimate study on him. So it's only here and there seeing some reps, which realistically, again, I think a lot of, and I always say this, but I feel like a dick. Like a lot of people's stuff is YouTube highlights and NFL.com
just
scouting
bombs,
reports.
Baby.
And
this is for all the cats I was balling with.
All of that. So yeah. So mindset. Latham is easily 1. I actually think, maybe not easily. A close second is I'm going to say Fuaga, because I don't care. I'm not saying Fuaga because I'm going to jack it up. I will say I will learn how to pronounce it if he's drafted by the Jets. I'm just saying Fuaga. It's Fuaga.
All right.
So it's Latham, Fuaga. And then I would say a very, very large gap. And then you could actually, let me correct that. You got Latham 1. You have Fuaga 2. I would say like a 2B is Fatano, yes, Fatano is definitely aggressive from what I've seen. So I would say those three are pretty elite in that category. Like they all have an elite aggressive mindset from what I've watched, obviously of Fatano, but definitely with Latham and Fuaga. And then a very large gap, I would say, like a very, very massive gap. Alt would probably be next, and then Fashanu. They just don't really lack nasty. They're guys who like they'll see guys go on the turf. And not that they'll help them up, but they're closer to helping them up than they are to burying their face in the turf, which really, really turns me off on prospects. I like when guys are aggressive.
Do you immediately knock a guy down if you see him hold somebody, help somebody up? Like, is that an immediate red flag?
Yeah, it's a red flag. It is. Like I don't think you can be nice as an offensive lineman. Yeah. It's a flag to me because I think you have to be like a nasty, excuse my French, like MFer here to play, NFL lineman.
How dare you say MFer on this?
Yeah,
podcast.
I don't want to like. I don't know. I don't know how Clear Jets works, but here we go. So I do enough cursing on my own stuff, but those three top, and then again a very, very large gap, Alt and Fashanu. And Alt was something I heard that was aggressive in the run game and stuff like that. Again, I have a review of him coming. I think I'm actually doing it on Saturday. He lacks nasty. Like I very rarely see him finish guys to the ground and things like that. So I think Alt is actually pretty overrated at this point.
Okay, and I don't know if this counts as mindset, but this is something I found interesting watching your review because you mentioned Becton does this a lot, and you saw Fuaga do it, where he tries to go for like the baldy breakdown highlight instead of like climbing the tree, I think is how you put it, where it's like he'll get to the end, and maybe you can explain this better than I can try to stumble through this. But did you include that in mindset?
No, because like they both have the same mindset. Like Latham and Fuaga have the same mindset to finish this guy to the ground. It's just about staying attached. Obviously, when you're 330 pounds and you launch a guy, he's gonna have the necessary athleticism to avoid you laterally. But guys like Latham, when they're able to get that quarter turn, like I always say, when you quarter turn, you activate your back muscles and you want to lift and drive them. Becton or Fuaga, like Becton, tend to throw guys and then they'll lose him, laterally. So it's not a mindset thing. I think like honing in on the aggressive mindset in terms of like just being proper with your technique. I think it's possible. So I'm not gonna like knock the mindset. He's trying to finish him to the ground just in the wrong way.
All right. So for mindset, we have Latham 1, Fuaga 2, Fatanu 3, big gap, and then Fashanu. How about athleticism? And I guess this include like lateral movement, which I know you also said like people say lateral movement, and I do all the time. You're like, well, what do you mean by that? There's like 4 to 5 different things you could qualify that with. But like quickness, feet, technique.
Yeah, and it ties into like your size too, because does a guy like Latham have to have the same athleticism in terms of laterally as a guy like Fatanu, because he's bigger, so he has a little bit more like leeway to not be as fast. So you have to kind of like, you can't compare Romo Dunze to Wes Welker. Like, obviously they're different players. Like they're both athletic in their own ways. So kind of, it's harder to necessarily like boil it down in terms of like athleticism. That's
Fashanu's 312 and Latham's 340, I think 342.
Yeah. Fashanu is like 315 or something like that, or whatever it is. I think Fuanga, whatever the hell his name is 330. I think Latham's 3, but I think he has 33-inch arms. Latham is 340, but he has 35-inch arms. So that kind of ties into measurables / athleticism. Yeah. So people talk about Latham like he's some lumbering guy. I think a lot of his problem comes in terms of like his face getting crossed, like him getting a little bit heel clicky in the contact window. It's not because of lack of lateral athleticism. So people just see they're like, oh, he can't get lateral. It's like, no, his feet are bad in this aspect. So if he improves his feet, he has the necessary athleticism. But I would start from the bottom in terms of athleticism. I would definitely say that Fuaga is probably the worst athlete of the crew. He has probably the best, one of the best strengths, him and Latham, but his like redirectability, his lateral movement, his ability to kind of stop, plant and redirect movement, it's not the best. So I think Fuaga is definitely the worst athlete. It's and again, it's just kind of drawn off the top of my head. Obviously, I didn't get like sent questions or anything. I never require that. But so it's like off the top of my head. No, I don't ever require that. I like thinking on my toes. So in terms of athleticism, I would say Fuaga. Honestly, and this is something like people might think I'm crazy here. I think I might go Alt 4. I don't think he's the best athlete.
Hey, we're not including Alt. Not
Oh,
including
okay.
alt. Well, I
Not
mean,
including
well,
alt.
I want to hear that take though, because that's actually pretty interesting. But like,
Yeah.
I just assuming alt's not on the board. Maybe
Okay.
maybe this is like the Sam Darnold thing I did in
Okay.
2018, where I just ignored him because I assumed he
Okay.
wouldn't
So
be there.
he's not on
We're doing
the
the
board.
4 of Fashanu, Fatanu, Fuanga, and Latham.
Yeah,
Which maybe that's dumb, but
I guess after that, I would probably, and considering he's a little bit, I guess Latham 3. Like Latham's not a stud athlete. He's powerful as hell, but it's not like he's some stud athlete. So I'd probably go him 3. I'd probably go Fashanu 2, and then probably Fatanu 1. But the thing with Fatanu is, it's like, yeah, he's a great athlete, but I'm not sure how great his anchor is, and that's a part of like your athleticism as well, like your strength, your athleticism, all that. So he's number 1, but with an asterisk, because I really didn't see as much in terms of power in his game that I necessarily wanted to. Like he's explosive on contact because of how aggressive he is and like how he accelerates into contact and things like that. But in terms of like, stringing out blocks and getting into like your getting into your anchor, your bridge, in terms, your anchor to your bridge. I don't know how strong he is there. So it's like an asterisk, but I would say him probably 1 for Shanu, and then Latham, I guess, with Fuaga being a pretty clear 4 to me if I had to rank.
And I noticed you were, because people talk about Fashanu, like I think he was a basketball player in high school, and people talk about him as being like maybe the best athlete. And I think I've seen other people say Fatanu as well.
Yeah.
But I saw you were a little bit down on Fashanu's athleticism a little bit in comparison to what the buzz is. Do you not think that he's as
I think he's athletic. I think it's more technical wise that I have a problem with him, like in the run game and stuff like that. Again, getting under guys, attacking the hip, lift versus push, driving the feet, climbing the tree. There's a lot of technical aspects I think he's lacking in the run game, but in terms of like pure power, movement, ability to drop his post, do all that stuff, I think he's a pretty damn good athlete. It just comes from the mindset and then the actual technical aspect of his run game. Now, like I said to you guys before we even started recording, like I watch so many people that sometimes I forget like exactly my thoughts on people. But it to me, it wasn't a lack of like strength or anything like that in the run game. Right. It was more technical wise. And you also have to consider that I believe he's like 21 years old, so he's pretty young. So he's not fully built into his body. But I do struggle with like him and Latham, because again, Latham is a guy who is not as he's not as maneuverable as a guy like Fashanu, but he's also so much more powerful. In terms of his grip strength, if he has you, you're done. His anchor, you're done. Like he's very, very intriguing in terms of his strength. So that's kind of like a 2A, 2B type of thing with those guys. Like Latham's not a far third to Fashanu.
Also, like I'm looking at the measurables right now. Latham's hands are listed at 11 and 1/8, and Fashanu's are listed at 8.5. So that seems like that would matter. Yeah. Alt is 10. Fuanga is 10 1/4, and then I got to go to guards for Fatanu. But you mentioned anchor, and I think that's probably the next one that we should go to. By the way, Fatanu's hands are 9.5. So yeah, you definitely see with Latham, like similar to Tyron Smith. I mean, not exactly, but like long arms, vice grips for hands, and that matters at the next level. All right, if you had to rank them by their anchor, and maybe for somebody who's listening, like what exactly does that mean? How would you rank them?
What does that mean? It's you're getting.
I know what it means, but you can explain it better than I can.
You're getting bull rush, and you want to drop your hips below their hips. You want to get on your insteps. Obviously, like I said in the reviews, your knee acts like as a natural pivot point. So it's easier to work against, like a hinge, like a door. It's easier to like open this. I always like try to find like ways to kind of describe this like body mechanic stuff, and I always struggle to do it. But the knee, the arms obviously have the natural pivot point. You want to work. You don't want to work with that pivot point. You want to work against it. When you turn your knees or your toes out, you're working the insteps, where there's a lot of power come from. Drop your hips, get under them, lift. Again, a lot of people think football is pushing. It's a lot more lifting than pushing, or it's a lot more than you think lifting in terms of pushing. If you're going to push all the time, something that alt does, you're going to struggle. And that's one of my problems with alt. But in terms of who has the best anchor, it's a pretty close tie between Fuanga and Latham. I would say probably Latham off the top of my head with the anchor, just because I think Fuanga has the necessary like power, but I don't think he gets as low off the top of my head. So pretty close, like 1A, 1B there. I would give it to Latham. Again, super, super powerful anchor. Same thing with Fuanga. Very, very large gap. Again, like very, very large gap. I would probably say Fashanu 3, and then alt. And alt's A lot of his problems come from, again, being overextended. He doesn't close ground like he should. Again, I think there's a lot of push, and I know you say we weren't ranking him, but I am anyway.
All right.
He doesn't have, in terms of his
Going rogue.
first pull or push first lift, he doesn't understand that yet. So I have a problem with Alt. And honestly, after watching Alt and doing his review this weekend, he actually might drop the tackle 3 for me. So
really? All right, maybe I should include him. So maybe you think I'm misguided by just assuming he won't be there?
No, I don't. It's hard to say why is the hype there? I don't understand it. Like, now I think he's a good prospect. I don't understand why he's some slam dunk no miss prospect like people are talking about.
He looks like Joe Thomas, maybe.
I don't. Maybe it's the size. It's Notre Dame, but I turned on the film and I watched 4 games and or maybe 5 games. And if he's drafted by the Jets, I'll get more. But I was watching those games and I was like, every other play that I recorded was a bad play. So I think I have like 30 plays of him, and probably 14 of them are bad. So It's not like I was blown away by his review. Now, just based on the hype, I don't think he's going to be there. But again, I'm questioning more of the process. Again, why were people so high on Evan Neal? I literally have no idea. I do not know. Alt's kind of the same thing. I'm not saying as bad. I wouldn't have drafted Evan Neal in the 3rd round, like legitimately, a couple of years ago. Alt, I would take him at 10. It's just, I think he's pretty overhyped. But then I guess after Alt, it's and maybe even Fatanu might even be better just because he's a little bit more lower built. A lot of Alt's problems he's scrappy too. But a lot of Alt's problem comes that he's so damn tall. Like at a point, being tall is great for length, but I don't think his arm length is that great. I think it's like 34 inches. So he's kind of tall with shorter arms in terms of like relative to his body size.
Yeah, and 34, and he has 10 inch hands.
Yeah, and the problem comes, it's like people think about like leverage in terms of just your helmet being below a guy. It's really your hips. Like, whose hips are lower? And Alt's hips are so damn high, it's really, really hard for him to get under guys. So I see him struggling at the NFL level with power. So I would probably say him last out of those guys. And you start to talk about like mindset, anchor, athleticism. I'm kind of putting him down here. It's like, why is he 2? Why is he 3? Yeah. Like, I don't know.
We should include him then. Yeah, let's include him then.
Okay. Yeah. So those would be my anchor rankings.
Do you feel like he knows how to use that height? Because like you always compare trench play to like it's basically a combat sport. I mean, you use boxing a lot, but then you mentioned wrestling and stuff. And like tall fighters generally have an advantage because they have the reach. But if you don't know how to use that, and you're facing a guy like Mike Tyson who doesn't have the reach but knows how to get inside and make it a nightmare for you, and there's certainly pass rushers who are kind of like that. Do you think that Alt is one of those guys? Wait, what'd you say?
I'll say, by the way, I really need him to knock out Jake Paul. Let's just start there. But
yeah, I mean, I don't think they should be making that fight anyway. But there's a chance. He's 58 years old, coming off hip surgery. I mean,
he just needs one good uppercut. That's a problem. He's lost his chin probably. But we were talking. What was exactly the question? Where were we going to on that?
Well, I think I was just asking about Alt, like, because you mentioned he's so tall.
Does he know how to use the life?
Yeah, like I'll be honest, I haven't watched Alt at all because like Sam Darnold in 2018, I'm just assuming he's not going to be there. But is there a world where the Titans are like, all right, well, let's take Fashanu and then like maybe and maybe that's the only tackle that goes, or maybe the Chargers take Latham because they want to build a bully up front. Like, there is a world where he's there at 10, so maybe I shouldn't discard him.
I think it's a possibility because like I see it that way. If I was at 7, would I take Alt first? No, I would probably take Latham first. And I could see a world where after watching his review and actually breaking it down, because like I say in the reviews all the time, like I watch it quickly, record it, and I kind of break it down as I'm talking about it on the stream or on the film reviews. So I'll watch him again and then I'll have like a really good ranking, but I'm at the point now where like gun to my head right now, Fashanu is probably number 2 for me, just like really being true to my evaluations. And sometimes it's hard to go against the grain because everybody obviously, hypes up guys and then you talk down on them and nobody's going to like go and watch
deal with Luke on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. And like nobody's going to go on and like watch the reviews. So it's like you have to fight the narrative. Oh, yeah, stats, whatever it may be. And it's like I'm breaking down the film. I'm trying to show you guys exactly what I'm seeing. And just based on like purely my film evaluation and really not letting anybody else's opinions trickle into my mind, Alt's probably 3 for me right now. So and in terms of like using it well, again, it kind of at a certain point it becomes like it becomes a bad thing to be so tall because again your hips are so high. So like being 6'8", like you tell me just in a box, hey, one guy's 6'6", one guy's 6'8", who do you want to draft? I'm taking the 6'6" guy just because again being so tall can hurt you. And like his arms aren't even long. So that's the main benefit of being so tall mostly is the arm length, and his arms are still shorter than JC Latham. So I think initially he uses his length well. Like he's good at timing his punches. He's good at anticipating like that contact window, getting his hands on guys. The problem with Alt is not initial contact. It's like that secondary part of it where we talk about like, okay, you punch a guy and then you want to get that quarter turn, and then like I said, for lack of a better term, I say in the reviews all the time, like you want to get tip to tip with a guy. Like ideally, you basically again match tips, and you're just trying to lift and get under him. And the problem with Alt is he's playing like this a lot, and he doesn't have control of guys. Obviously, again, you're more powerful the closer you are to your body. If you're trying to carry a 100-pound dumbbell through your streets, you're not going to carry it like this. You're going to carry it like this because you're stronger like that. So he plays way overextended, but again, he's not even that long. So I think people like look at his height like, oh my God, 6'8", it's so great. But really, I think it actually hurts his game. So yeah, I would say he does not use initially, yes, but then how do you follow that up? Initial contact is great, but if you don't follow it up well, again, and get those proper techniques down in terms of like dropping your anchor, getting the quarter turn, all that stuff, lift, getting to your bridge properly, you're kind of screwed. So he struggles with the actual technique of his anchor, and then consider the fact that he's as tall as he is and as light as he is. I just don't see him being able to be a great prospect right off the jump. Like there's people talking about him, and it happens all the time. I think it's easier for people to hype up prospect than like bury prospects, because obviously hype kind of sells. I guess negativity does too, but everybody likes to like everybody's the greatest prospect. We have Romo Dunze is Larry Fitzgerald, and Malik Neighbors is Antonio Brown, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is Marvin Harrison dad. Like everybody's the greatest prospect, so it's kind of hard to go against the grain. But I try to stay true to what I see, and I'm struggling to see the hype on Alt at this point.
I just realized Fatanu has longer arms than Joe Alt.
Exactly.
And Latham does too. That's crazy.
So I'll rather take the guy who's 6'6", 6'5", 6'4", with the longer arms. At a certain point, being stocky and squatty is good, especially if you have long arms. That's a hell of a thing. It's like, didn't Carl Lawson, like he had pretty long arms, I believe, for being a shorter guy, and like that helps you being stocky, but also having the advantage of length, because again, it's more about the arm length. It's not about height. Height doesn't really help you out so much because, again, how does that incorporate into having your back straight up and pushing a guy? It hurts you if anything.
Yeah.
How would you rank these guys in terms of just like overall drive, leverage, power in the run game specifically? And also looking at this Jets team, obviously we know it appears that they will be making some sort of a transition into gap scheme, or at least significantly increasing those types of plays. So how would you rank their overall drive in the run game, and then looking at the Jets scheme fit specifically?
Yeah, and I think So I would say Latham won again. Mauler, like we've seen that in the run game, right? Like the dude is an absolute monster. He's such a good fit for power. Fuaga is, I would say he's two, but honestly, Fuaga for me is I think with like tackles who you're kind of questioning, like, okay, tackle or guard. Fail at tackle first, then go into guard. So I think they'll get him. I think he'll get that opportunity, but I do think he ends up as a guard at the NFL level. But I would say him 2. I would probably say Fatanu 3, just because of he has that mindset that I think Alt and Fashanu lack. And I think that's a big part of it. Again, pretty novice in terms of like watching his film, but if I had to guess, he would probably be 3. I would say Alt 4, and then Fashanu 5. Again, Alt's not really going to move guys in the run game. He's just so damn high. Like there's times where he's even attacking guys at the hips and stuff like that, but he's just so high, so he's not able to get his hips underneath his hands. So yeah, that would be my 5.
I gotta say, I'm liking I like that it's at least new. Like I've never really considered, I've just kind of wrote him off, but I think one, there's a good chance that he's there at 10. And is there a chance that the Jets pass on him at 10? Like with what you're saying, I mean, you're saying that you would take him, but if it's between Latham and Alt and Fatanu, it sounds like you would take Latham. I don't know how you feel about Fatanu versus Alt. We can get into the rankings at the end here, but it's just, this is why we always bring you on, Joe, is you at least have your original opinions that aren't fed by a narrative you see on NFL.com.
Yeah, man, like it is what it is. Because and then you get dunked on for sometimes when you miss, which I've missed. I would say Kyle Hamilton, and I was probably a little bit hard on. I would say Icky, I've missed on, even though I think he would be a better guard than tackle, and they've still played him at tackle. But then you have guys like Evan Neal, who people are saying he's generational, and there's guys I respect out there. Like I think Brandon Thorne had him as his number 2 overall prospect in the entire draft. I'm like, I don't understand, which is why I don't really trust people to just their opinions. It doesn't matter if it's DJ, Brandon Thorne, whoever it is. I like to see like physical evidence. Like you could say something. It's easy to say something, but like show me what you're saying. And I don't see a lot of people really provide any evidence. And if it is evidence, it's a 5-minute, 10-minute video with 3 highlight plays. Those are his strengths, and then 3 weaknesses, and it's one play. Like it's not large enough sample size. And I get that these national scouts and stuff have to watch so many people, so they might just watch a game or two, but it's not enough for me. So it's hard to really trust. Like same thing with Treylon Burks, again, another guy who people hyped up, but nonetheless, yeah, it's for me. If it was Alt or Latham at 10, I'm definitely taking Latham. And again, gun to my head right now, Alt or Fashanu at 10, I might take Fashanu. And I know people in the comments are gonna say, "Oh my God, that's so crazy again." But really sit there and like think, like, how deeply have I really looked into this opinion? And like it's crazy to me, like just in country in general, just in the world in general, how people are willing. I'm sure there are people who are willing to get in fist fights over Bowers, and those people have done legitimately 5 minutes of research into Bowers, legitimately fist fights for no reason. So
that's kind of where we live in, though. You see one tweet, now you're an expert on the subject.
I know. So I know people will be there, but again, before you type it, just ask yourself, like, have I really watched Alt, or have I just mimicked other people's opinions of Alt? And those people have not even provided evidence. So it is what it is. Like, I'm not afraid to be original about that. So yeah, I would definitely take Latham over him, and I'm slightly leaning towards even Fashanu over him. Fatanu, I haven't watched enough. I could say that I think he's very intriguing, but he's very volatile in terms of like really good play, really bad play, really aggressive mindset. He plays a little bit out of control sometimes. I don't think his anchor is great. So I think he has a good initial pop on contact because of how aggressive he is. I'm almost like, and I'm not comparing him to Billy Turner, but like that's why Billy Turner is better at guard, because you take him out of an island, you just get that quick contact, explosion off the snap. Like he was good at that. So I'm not saying he is that guy, but I'm not sure if he's a tackler or a guard yet. And then again, I think he's very volatile. So I would take Alt over him. But it's not something where, again, Alt is some top 5 guy. I heard people say trade up. If they traded up for Alt, I would have serious issues with it. So.
All right. Well, I think like Fatanu in some ways is the best fit, not necessarily from a scheme perspective, but just in the sense that it's like, well, you could start him over John Simpson, and then if there's an injury, you can move him around just because you have that positional flexibility. And I want to ask that about some of the other guys. I do want to just, before we get to the last one, just because we included Alt at the end here. So we have driving the run game. You have them ranked Latham, Fuaga, Fatanu, Alt at 4, and Fashanu. With mindset, you have Latham, Fuaga, Fatanu, Fashanu. Where would you put Alton in the mindset category?
I would probably put him 4 and then Fashanu 5 there. But again, between the top 3 and 4 and 5, there is an unspeakable gap there. Like I do not like the way that Alt plays or Fashanu plays inside of mindset, like at all. And again, that's a large problem I had with Warren and Mitchell. You watch them, it's like these guys are getting bitched quite often. Yeah. And there's a guy who was laying on their face, and you see guys like Latham, like Fatanu, like Fuaga, they will bury guys. And listen, like you're in the trenches with 300-pound dudes. Like you have to have some type of an aggressive mindset, especially in the run game, finishing guys. I don't. So when people lack that, it's legitimately a pretty big red flag for me.
Also, how many times have we seen like a Jets quarterback get hit late, and then the offensive linemen just stand there and do nothing? Don't really,
exactly.
You know what
I mean? And they've changed that mindset. Like you watch you see the guys that they picked up this year. Simpson is, I'm not gonna say he's like nasty, but he has some nasty to him.
Those 15 penalties are nasty.
Yeah, Moses is a nasty finisher. Love Moses in that aspect. Tyron Smith, he's relatively nasty, but they have some mean guys in the offensive line now. And like you said, like you see, Zach Wilson get cheap shotted on the sideline against the Pats, and like nobody does anything; they just walk away. So I do think when you're in the trenches like that, like you have to be kind of a psychopath, like you do.
Yeah. And then before we get to the hands and pass protection, you had athleticism ranked Fatanu, Fashanu, Latham, Fuaga. Where are you sliding in Alt here?
What was the ranking again from them?
Fatanu 1, Fashanu 2, Latham at 3, and Fuaga at 4.
And this is athleticism?
This is for athleticism. So we did like lateral movement, quickness.
Yeah. I would say for Alt, I don't know, man. Probably 4 again. Right. Might be 4.
Wow.
And I might put Latham above Fashanu. I put Latham above Fashanu there, just because Latham, he has good movement skills, but he also has a ridiculous amount of more power than Fashanu. And again, Alt is like, I think he's like technically sound in some aspects, but Ben, you'll watch the review. I'm sure it's only gonna be like an hour long. But in terms of like some physical, nasty guy who's like so athletic. I think he's like moves well and stuff for his size, but in terms of like driving guys out of their spot, like really digging guys out of their spot in the line of scrimmage, I don't see him do it so well. So it just is what it is.
And then the last one, and you did give an answer for this, I'm just forgetting. But anchor, we had Latham, Fuanga, Fashanu, Fatanu. Where did you slide Alton there? So Latham at 1, Fuanga at 2, Fashanu.
I think he's probably 4. I would say I would say Fatanu 5.
Wow.
Like, but again, like you're really looking at these traits, and I'm starting to think it's like
he's 4 in all these categories. So right now he's your 4. I mean, we'll get into hands and pass protection. Maybe he catches up here, but the last one would be hands and pass protection. How would you rank them?
Fashanu 1. Fashanu 1. I would say Latham 2. It's pretty hard with Fatanu, but I would say. I had Fashanu, I had Latham. I would say probably Alt 3. I would say Fatanu 4, even though again I'm pretty unsure, and then Fuaga 5. Fuaga, he really carries that outside hand pretty low. His hands really frequently land wide, and then when he doesn't have like control of your chest and they move lateral, he has a really hard time like with that redirect lateral ability. So I would say Fuaga 5 on that one.
Wow. All right. Well, we can get into the offense tackle rankings. And Michael, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add on this. I know Blewett's our resident draft guy here, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on some of these rankings. I'm personally. I'm liking this alt discourse. I'm kind of getting on board. You really sold me on JC Latham when I watched your review, and now I'm willing to take up the Joe Alt's going to be a bust caravan. If you,
I don't know if I said that.
I'm pretty sure you said that. I'm gonna start making the t-shirts.
It's just like show me what he does very, very well. Like it's like it's not even like me trying. I'm not just trying to be anti, but I hear people talk about him. It's like, oh, I can't find a weakness for this guy. It's like, what? Like you can't? Then what are you watching? And I heard
that
the same
article
thing
I read on Yahoo Sports did not say a single bad thing about him.
I've heard the same thing for Odunze. Like, there's no weaknesses. Like, show me him cleanly being pressed because I don't know if I saw it. So every guy has issues. Like Latham has his issues. Alt has it. Like nobody's a perfect prospect, but to say that Alt does not have issues, I don't understand. Either you're not watching or you don't know what you're watching. I'm sorry. That's just that. It's either one of those two because just seeing how long, like again, playing long before contact is a great thing. Playing long into a combo block when you're climbing up to the second level is a good thing. But when you're trying to anchor down and control a guy, playing long is a terrible thing. It's terrible. Yeah. And he does it very frequently. He plays very overextended. So again, the review will be out there. Again, I know the trolls will be out there, whatever it is, what it is. Go watch a review and combat like actual plays I put up. That's what I recommend.
All right, the last thing, and we don't necessarily have to rank these guys, but I do want to know about positional flexibility because like we've said, and we talked about it with Fatanu, that's a big thing with this offensive line pick is like that can make it intriguing in a win now year. And again, with the Jets injury history, with Tyron Smith's injury history, with Elijah Vera Tucker's injury, I think this 6 offensive lineman is going to play more games than he's not. You might disagree with that, but I just think history has shown us that 6 offensive lineman is going to be playing by week 2. But one of the intriguing parts is like, all right, well, if you have a guy who can play multiple different spots and he's not just pigeonholed into just being a left tackle or just being a right tackle, it gives you that flexibility if AVT went down or if Morgan Moses went down, etc. So how do you see these guys in terms of their positional flexibility? Obviously, Fatanu would be number 1 there. You don't have to rank him. But like Latham, do you see him being able to play guard? Do you see him being able to play left tackle? Same for Fuanga, all Fashanu.
Yeah, I guess Fatanu is like he's good with positional flexibility, but again, like I would have to watch more. Like, I think he has the capability to in terms of like his athleticism, explosion, all that stuff, but can he really? Like, how clean is his technique? Is he a guy who is late with his hands and wide with his hands? Like, if you're late with your hands and you're not really quick with your hands, good luck at guard because the contact is very quick there. So, I guess in terms of like his actual athleticism and stuff, like, yeah, I guess he would be the best in terms of his flexibility because maybe he could play tackle, maybe he could play guard. But at the same point, like he might go to tackle and get dominated by bull rushers all the time. So then he forced into guard where he can get quick contact more. Like, so I guess he's looked at as the most versatile, but like, is he truly? I can't necessarily test because I haven't studied him as much as I possibly wanted to. And then like you'd assume I would say Fuaga too, because like he could play tackle or guard, but he might be forced at guard because he can't play tackle. So then how truly versatile is he? I don't know. It's kind of like a hard question to answer until I actually see him at guard. But I think he can play tackle in a pinch. Again, I think Fuaga is probably better off as a guard. He might come to the NFL and be a decent tackle, and they keep him there because like tackles are more valuable than guards, even though I'd rather have an all-pro guard than just an okay, tackle. Not saying that's necessarily him, but that's kind of the argument with AVT. So I would say I guess he's relatively versatile, but again, he might be forced in there. Latham, could he play inside? Yes. But why? He's never done it. So why are we going to do that to him? In terms of Latham being able to play left tackle, I think he's more than capable. Now he's never played left tackle, at least at the collegiate level. I think he played in high school.
Yeah,
he played in high school.
He was the backup right guard his freshman year. I think he only played like 100 snaps or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure he could. Like he has the necessary power. I don't think he moves as well as you necessarily want. Like your guard, like if you're asking him to reach and stuff, like that's not the best situation for him inside. And like you don't want to be so tall into the inside again. You want like more of your squatty guys like 6'3", 6'4" inside who can anchor down quickly. A lot more like quick combat there, so you don't necessarily need to be as long. But I think JC Latham would be okay inside, but I don't think they're ever going to move him. But could he play left tackle? I see no issue with him doing that. Now, again, he hasn't played it in years, so does it take him an extra game or two, 3, 4, half the season to adjust? Maybe it takes him a little bit, but I don't see a reason that he can't. Like saying, I still don't. I'll never understand the argument of like, oh, he's athletic enough to play right tackle but not left tackle. It's like, explain to me why it's different. I don't. I get that the guy at left tackle, maybe you want him to be a little bit more athletic or a better pass blocker because the quarterback can't see it. But like, oh, athletic enough to play right tackle but not left. I think it's just things people say without really knowing why they say them. So I think he definitely play left tackle, and then alt inside. Good luck. He's gonna get bull rush all day. There's no way that's happening. And then
right
Fashanu. And then I think he played left tackle, right tackle. I think all guys can really play left tackle, right tackle. Like there's nothing I can say that without actual evidence I could say no, he could play left tackle but not right tackle. Like some guys, hey, again, I wipe my ass with my right hand. Could I wipe it with my left? I don't know. Maybe Ben is better at wiping his ass with his left hand. I don't know until I see Ben wipe his ass. It's impossible to really know. But in terms of like left tackle, right tackle, again, it's hard to know unless you actually see them do it. I think
they're switching their stance though. They're going south. They're going orthodox to southpaw. They're going a lot of boxing references today. But like if you're going to be left tackle, you're a southpaw fighter. And like some guys, they switch it and it's all of a sudden their back foot it's not their front foot anymore. And like you watch Latham, and a lot of times like and I don't even know what you would call this, but like some of that nastiness, you'll see him throwing a guy from you accused him a lot, or not accused him, but like you said sometimes like he'll overset and then get beat inside. But sometimes he'll be able to counter that by, it's not like judo or whatever, it's all the combat sports coming out, but he'll be able to throw a guy. Yeah, like he'll be able to throw a guy from his left inside shoulder and throw him to the right. And it's like now all of a sudden if he's on left tackle, can he do that? Is he throwing him right into his right guard now? You know what I mean? Like there are some things where it's like
again, it's just something you have to see. Like, hey Ben, do you know if I could throw a ball lefty? Like you don't know until you see me do it.
I definitely can't.
Okay, so you definitely can't. Maybe Nania can. Like it's really hard to know. I could tell you that. Okay, like Fashanu, Fuaga, I guess they're the most versatile because people look at them as a tackle or guard. But again, that might be because of actual lack of versatility. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. I think Latham could play both, but again, why in terms of like guard and tackle? And then Alt and Fashanu, if you move them inside, you're an idiot. There's no way they're playing inside. So those are definitely the least versatile in terms of at least playing inside outside. Again, left tackle, right tackle. I think every left tackle could play right. Every right tackle could play left. It's just about actually seeing them do it.
I want to ask you about something that you've posted about quite a few times by now. I think we've talked about it as well, but do you think trading up for Malik Neighbors is the Jets' best option in the first round? Like, is that just you being, going for something that might be a little more exciting, or like, do you legitimately think, considering everything we said about the O-line prospects, what you know about the receivers, is that the best case scenario?
Now, the only thing I want to preface this with is I don't know if there's any like credibility to the reports that he's like a me guy and stuff. That's something that I think we're not privy to in just like the draft community and evaluating players. It's such a huge thing. Like it's so
aren't
massive,
all receivers.
Yeah, well, no, like some of them are. Mike Williams is not a diva, like some of them.
Garrett Wilson isn't. You're right.
He's not like that. Yeah, Garrett Wilson has a twinge of it. You could see when he doesn't get the ball and stuff, he starts getting frustrated. Garrett Wilson has a little bit of it. He does.
Right,
he was yelling at Zach and stuff.
He's not Stephon Diggs level though.
No. I'm not accusing Garrett Wilson of anything.
I don't think we thought Diggs was that after his second year. That kind of comes in time.
Garrett was pretty pissed in his end of season interviews. He did not seem happy. He did not seem thrilled to be a Jet at that point. Now he said they talked it over and all that stuff, but still, you get nervous about him a little bit. Hopefully he resigns and all that, but nonetheless,
give him a year with Rodgers. He'll be all right.
Yeah, well, and then okay, I'm not going to say what I'm thinking there,
Joe.
I'm not going to say what I'm thinking. Okay, yeah. So, now in terms of the trade up again, so if Neighbors is a good guy, if he's going to work, all that stuff. Again, I do not know. I'm not in the interviews. I think that's a massive part to it. Like Becton might be a physical freak, but if he had the mindset of, let's say, a Bryce Hall, maybe he'd be an absolute stud right now. But maybe Becton's a little bit lazy and he eats too much of his mom's, Southern cooking,
like
whatever
Bryce
it may
Hall.
be.
You mean Bryce Hall? Wait.
Bryce Hall. No, Bryce Hall had, in terms of hearing about him in college, the dude had an elite mindset, never leaving the film room, all that stuff. Right. Bryce Hall is a guy who succeeded at the NFL level, or at least has a job in the NFL level, not because of athleticism, it's because of technique and film study. I like, him for that reason. Guys like Sauce, guys like Garrett, they have elite mindsets in terms of dedication to football. So without knowing that, it's hard for me to say, oh yeah, he's going to work out, because he could look great on film, and then behind the scenes, in a year, he's pissed not getting the ball and getting 500 yards and request a trade like Elijah Moore. So it's really hard to say I'll bet my life on it. But right now, if you're telling me, gun to my head, would you trade up, I don't know, next year's second and a 4th round pick for Neighbors? I'm inside the dotted line. He is my second ranked prospect out of all the people I watched. I think there's a large gap between him and Odunze. And again, just overall power rankings, it's Harrison first. Again, in passive watching, I think he's the best receiver. Neighbors 2. Pretty large gap, and then guys like Latham and however else we're gonna rank the rest of the group. And again, it's not because I get that people are gonna say offensive line, build the foundation, all that stuff, but I think after Rodgers leaves, the Jets are the Jets, and I'll just assume the worst, that we're gonna suck for another couple of years. So in terms of going for it all, I think that's the move, because at this point, we need a backup tackle. I know the long term stuff, I get it. I'm talking about 2024 season. We need a backup tackle, right? Bakhtiari, whoever that may be, Donovan Smith. We need a backup guard center, which could be McGovern, back for $1.5 million, $2 million.
Not having any nastiness.
Yeah, but still, I'll take him as a backup. He's a good backup for sure. So that's going to cost you all of $5-6 million. We re-signed Ashton Davis. You don't need that anymore. So you need a depth guard, a depth tackle. We'll see about D tackle. You need a backup running back, but we need a starting level receiver. And again, I think with people mock drafts, just filling a hole is filling a hole, and it's oh, well, this guy, Brian Thomas Jr. is a receiver. He just is, it fills the hole. We're good there. But it's again, it's the quality of how you're filling it. And I think Neighbors would be an absolute stud in the Jet system. I think that may be the move to legitimately, I'm not saying Neighbors individually going to win a Super Bowl, but having him in the starting lineup in that Super Bowl may win it for us, where having a guy like Fashanu on the bench may not. Now, again, Ben's situation, hey, everybody goes down, then Fashanu maybe gets us to that Super Bowl game because he steps in for a Tyron Smith. So I understand that, but again, I have Neighbors above those guys, and I'm kind of operating that everything's going to go well. And if they don't get a tackle in the draft, they'll sign a guy who, again, Bakhtiari versus Fashanu this year, I'm taking Bakhtiari in an individual game. So I am looking a little bit short-sighted, but I think this is the Jets' best opportunity to win a Super Bowl that I've ever seen. And I think that after Rodgers leaves, realistically, could we build back up and get to that spot again? Sure. Realistically, are we? Probably not. So I want to maximize Rodgers' opportunity. And I get people will say, well, hey, he made Lazard look a lot better and all that stuff. And, he could, look how good he makes him. But then you can also say the same thing about Neighbors. If he makes Lazard look that good, how good is he to make Neighbors look? So yeah, I am fully in the board of, or in the boat of trade up to 6 and get a guy like Neighbors.
It might not even be 6. I think 10 is really the spot where you could do it, because I think the Chargers have been very vocal about, 5. Sorry, my bad. 5 with the Chargers is really the spot where I think they've been pretty vocal about wanting to take an offensive lineman. And if you move up to 5, it's probably Neighbors. But there's a scenario also where the Cardinals trade back and a team takes J.J. McCarthy, and then you're talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. Michael, I don't know if you have the trade chart up or whatnot, or if you can pull it up, but I don't know what would 10-5 cost.
Well, I'm assuming 4 quarterbacks in the top 5, and then the other fifth being the other guy being a Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right. So
okay,
so you're saying 4 quarterbacks go 1 to 4, or are you saying
in the top 5?
Oh, okay. So you're saying okay.
In the top 5, and then you have a guy, whether it be trade down, whatever it may be, and then obviously Harrison's going to go. So 4 quarterbacks, 1 receiver, you have to get up to 6, in my opinion, to get him. Maybe he falls to 7. You never know. But
so 5 or 6 though, Michael. What is it? Do you know?
So I just pulled it up. So if you go to 5, that's 400 points, which is it's equal to the 50th pick, which obviously is mid-second round. 6 is 300. That's the 60th pick. So Jets don't have a second round pick. So you're talking about having to
like a second next year and like a fourth
pick,
or something like that.
Like a fourth this year. But I feel like I would have to look at it. But I feel like when you get into that top 5, top 5, 6, it's usually pretty unbalanced in favor of the team that's trading down, right? Especially if it's a quarterback. I mean, most of the draft, it's pretty even in terms of these point values, but I feel like some of those top 5 trades go beyond what the trade chart says. But yeah, that's what it would be according to this.
Well, all right. I mean, I could see it. I mean, I just want the offensive lineman, but I get the argument. If it's for Neighbors or Harrison Jr., I feel a little bit better about it than I would with the Dunze. Maybe we can wrap up here with just kind of going through your big board and I guess you can kind of talk through. I think I just feel differently about a Dunze versus a Latham than I would about all right, well, if you're moving up to 6 and you're not giving up what we said it would be 10, a future second and a fourth this year to get from 10 to 6 to get Neighbors. That is pretty exciting. I can't lie. That would be exciting. But
again, it's like the difference between and it depends on the second round pick, but that 4th round pick could be Carter Warren, it could be Max Mitchell, it could be Izzy, it could be a stud, but realistically, your hit rate on a 4th round pick is what, 20% maybe, and that's even being just a decent player. So
on the count of 3, everybody say a random 4th round pick from Jets history. I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. All right.
Oh God.
Random Jets, the first 4th round pick that comes to. I'm really trying to think.
Okay, I got it.
All right, hold on. Let me give me. I asked a question. Of course, I don't have one.
And you're not ready.
All right, I think I got one. Okay, ready? All right, 3. Listeners at home, you guys can do this too. All right, 3, 2, 1. Bryce Petty.
Shaq Evans.
Michael Carter.
I don't know. That doesn't count. Was Xavier Leggett? Was Xavier Leggett a 5th rounder?
Leggett?
What was Leggett?
Jordan Leggett, you mean?
Who was Leggett?
Jordan Leggett. I'm sorry, Xavier Leggett's a receiver this class. But I mean, sorry, Jordan Leggett, the tight end from Clemson, which I was watching his highlights and I was like, damn, his highlights are sick.
Again, could be good, but 20% chance. Am I going to lose my shit about losing a 4th round pick to pick up Neighbors? Or no, I'm not. That's second round pick.
Petty though.
That second, it could be Bryce Petty. It could be a really good player. It could be Michael Carter, who's decent for a year, then is off the team his second or third year, whatever it was. Now the second round pick, it hurts. But if you're talking about a second round pick to go up and get an absolute stud of a receiver, I'm willing to give up that second round pick. That second round pick could be Tippmann. It could be Stephen Hill. You don't really know. So I especially in a year where we're going for it all, I'm okay with mortgaging future question marks for something that I think is a stud of a player. I think people get obsessed with the draft picks, but if you can get 2 or 3 starters in a draft, that's an absolute slam dunk. And if you're talking about getting a guy with, let's say, Marvin Harrison Jr., who we think is generational, if we're not going to trade for generational player or a generational player, let me air quote that, because of a 4th round pick, I think you're kind of crazy, So I think people get too obsessed with the picks. I'm more looking for the sure thing at this point, where the Jets only have one legitimate starting hole right now, and they could address tackle with $2 million to Donovan Smith, $2 million to McGovern. Boom, that's $4 million. We're set. We have backup safeties. You draft the running back at in the 4th round, or sign Kareem Hunt and draft the guy. We need a receiver, and I think Neighbors is that next level guy who could really push this roster over the top.
Okay, on the flip side of it, how would you feel about a trade down if they're able to recoup? I mean, depending on how far they're trading down, because so if McCarthy falls to 10, which is maybe the best case scenario, but I don't think it's going to happen. There's that slew of teams right behind them with the Vikings, the Broncos, and the Raiders that you'd imagine would be calling to try to get up to get him. And in that case, maybe you're picking back up a third if you're moving back 2 or 3 spots. If you're moving further down, maybe a Dunze is there and I don't know, random, the Jaguars or whatever at 18, I think they want to move up. Maybe then you're getting a second round pick. How do you feel about trading down, in a win now year?
Yeah, it again, like it's the quality of like, and it always sounds so sexual, like filling the hole. Like it's all about the quality of it. And like I haven't watched like Mims and Fatano enough to be like, yeah, I'm so comfortable. The thing I would say, and just in general about trading down, is obviously you need a partner, right? And like teams who are going to need quarterbacks they're not necessarily going to be passive about wanting a guy. Like if you want a quarterback, you go and get your quarterback. You don't like wait and kind of like lack of a better term, like pussyfoot around it. Like you don't do that. Like you go up and get your guy. So I think the chances of them actually being able to trade down is pretty slim. Maybe teams are obsessed with the Dunze more than I am, and they're willing to trade up a few picks. But yeah, like a trade down. Let's say Latham is gone, and you trade down a couple of spots, and then you lose out on Fashanu, but you get Fatanu, and then because of that, you added another let's say second round pick or whatever it is, and that second round pick is now Leggett or one of these receivers in the second round, whoever's going to be there, then awesome. But again, I like the trade down stuff is cool in mock drafts because like, you get to fill all these spots. Like, oh my God, the Jets roster is so stacked. But again, it's about quality because if you trade down and Latham's at 10 and he was going to be a stud, and then you trade down to 18 and you get Fatanu and he sucks, but then you get a decent receiver in the third, you're going to regret it. So I think trading down is probably, it's more of just like a mock draft thing. It's probably not going to happen. I think most likely the Jets stick and pick. Or even get super aggressive and trade up, which Joe Douglas has done more than trade down. I don't know if he's actually even ever traded. Oh no, he traded down the Mims draft.
Yeah, the Mims trade, and then
but he traded up for ABT. So again, a second round pick next year and a fourth round pick this year for neighbors. I'm doing it all day.
All right, is there any chance? Because somebody, there was a listener who DM'd me this. That could you imagine a scenario where they trade down and take a defensive player? Like I think he either used like Cooper DeJean, like I think it was like the defensive back from Iowa, which he raised the point. It's like, hey, safety's not necessarily great. And then we talked about it on our last podcast. It's like, hey, Reed and Michael Carter II are both free agents after the year. And it's like, this is one of those things where it's like, you're a fan. You're like, well, that's not a need right now. It's a win now year. But then you look at it's like, well, it is a need in the future. And if one of those guys went down, you wouldn't hate it. Or it's like they could trade down and take like a defensive tackle, which I'm sure fans would love. But is there any scenario? Just because I feel like we should cover our bases here. Michael, do you see a world where they trade down and take a defensive player?
No, I don't. Like, what position are you picking at this point? Especially now that they re-signed Davis.
18.
It's just,
let's say they move down to 18, which I think is the Jaguars.
There's just no position you could pick someone that is going to have a place on this team this year.
So the only thing I would combat that with is saying that if I told you before the draft they were going to draft Will McDonald, you'd say absolutely not. Like that's not going to happen. And then being with that being said, there is that D tackle from Texas. What is it, Murphy?
Yeah, Byron Murphy. And then there's Jason Newton, I think.
Yeah, so I'll say Murphy because that's the guy I know. Like, could I see them picking him at 18? And the problem comes with allocation of resources. So at that point, I would probably say like get rid of like a JFM or something like that, just because how many first round picks and how much money you're going to have tied up in there. I think the Jet, and I'm hoping that the Jets do this. I don't have so much faith because they've not made personnel decisions I thought they should have in the past. But moving JFM inside on rush downs, I think is the way to maximize this defensive line.
I want to get into it, but we'll be here for 3 hours because I did say like we want to talk about all the different fronts they can use with Hassan Reddick, but it's mainly going to be Reddick, and I think it's a combo of JJ and McDonald. And again, for my money, you move in JFM inside and Q inside, and you have your best rushers. So we're saying like in a scenario where Javon Kinlaw is on the field at any point, we're going to have two of JFM, JJ, Reddick or McDonald on the bench. It just doesn't seem smart to me because Kinlaw's on the team. Like it's kind of stupid. So to me, move JFM inside. What do you think? Saleh just thinks that because do you think he just fell in love with him when they drafted him, and he's like
nepotism and their ability to bring up defensive linemen and stuff. It was a massive overpay in my opinion. I'd much rather have brought back Quentin Jefferson for even the same price, but half the price that he went for.
How many sacks would Kinlaw have to get for you to get his jersey?
There's 20. If
Kinlaw had 10 sacks, would you get his jersey?
No. Why would I do that?
Because he proved you wrong. These are the bets that we make. All right.
If he gets 10 sacks, you can send me his jersey for free, and I will use it if I'm cold. That's about it.
Yeah.
It's
clean your car with it.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It's not. I need microfibers.
Nice.
I got that new
Also,
truck.
it'll be the new jerseys which come out on
Yeah,
Monday.
I got that new truck. That's not good enough
All right.
fabric for me. So
Big car guy.
yeah, now I am. I used to have really shitty cars, and I dropped a lot on the truck. But nonetheless,
It's that JetX subscriber check. It's actually maybe it's the Twitter Blue check
I don't have Twitter Blue
or X or whatever.
X check, but I don't have that either. So yeah, I would say JFM to the inside would be the way to maximize this, because I just don't see one of those guys sitting on the bench for Kinlaw. So it's again, Kinlaw over JFM, or Kinlaw over JFM, Kinlaw over Reddick, Kinlaw over McDonald, Kinlaw over JJ. In those scenarios, like that's kind of how you're looking at it. To not move JFM to the inside should be really stupid for me. But I don't know where we were before this, but
we were talking about maybe they could trade down and take a defensive guy. I was just trying to get
I could see Murphy, because if you were to get rid of JFM, you want to get rid of that $14 million, $13 million, whatever it is, and build young. Again, I severely doubted the McDonald pick. I never thought that would happen. I think D tackle at this point's a bigger need than D end was last year when they took McDonald. So why couldn't not happen? It's not something that I want to happen, but I could see them doing it for sure.
All right, let's get to your big board, because you have a wife and kids at home, and Michael and I could sit here for 3 hours and talk about Hassan Reddick packages. But let's go through the big board and then we'll get out of here. I mean, you already said, but you want to lead off with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. That's your clear first option for the Jets, would be to try to trade up for one of those guys. They do their 5 or 6, because that's the best move in a win now year. Those are the players you feel the most confident about. Sounds like number 3 is Latham for you. And the only thing I'll say about Latham, which we didn't talk about, was the penalties. And I think he had 18 over the last 2. Yeah. And to me, like a lot of times that, especially with a guy like Latham, and you tell me if you see this too, but like one of the things you said and we talked about earlier was like him oversetting and then getting beat inside. And part of those penalties and those false starts, and maybe the holds as well, is him trying to get a head start on a guy beating to the outside, maybe trying to overcompensate for, and maybe you don't see this, a lack of lateral quickness or something like that. Like the penalties to me are the real big red flag with Latham. Is that something that's concerning to you?
Yeah, I try to find like a breakdown of the actual penalties and what they were. I think part of it comes from like him. Okay, perfect. So he gets like heel clicky, in that contact window. So yeah, look at his face crossed. He might hold. Part of it comes from, I saw at least 2 penalties where it was like unnecessary roughness, like him just absolutely destroying a guy on the ground after he pancakes them. And then he also has a problem in terms of like just being over aggressive and trying to drive guys to the ground in terms of like, hey, it's towards the end of the run. But he wants to, keep holding you and drag you and drag you to the ground. So I think it's more of an over aggression thing than I think it's like a technical flaw with him, minus him getting his face crossed. But again, that's not because of lack of lateral athleticism to me. It's more because of, actual technique wise. So I don't really question Latham's athleticism like overall, because I think he has necessary size and power to, make up for some maybe lack of movement skills that he has, which obviously is going to come when you're 6'6", 340 pounds.
It says he combined for 18 penalties over his 2 seasons as a starter, including 7 false starts and 6 holding calls. So that leaves 5 unnecessary roughnesses or whatever. Whatever.
But so like six holding, the false starts. Hopefully you can coach it out of him. But like 6 false starts or 6 holding calls. So 3 in the last, or like 3 a season in the last 2 years.
Yeah, it really I don't know the exact breakdown.
Is that really the biggest deal? And if we fixed his feet and he wasn't oversetting guys, would that 3 turn into 2 or 1? Probably, in my opinion. So I think people just see like Becton bad, Latham bad, because they're both big, and they say they can't move, but it's not true that Latham can't move. It's
he's
just
2 inches shorter too, which I think does help him.
And he's also like 20, 30 pounds lighter.
Yeah,
so they're not
that
the same guy
too.
at all.
That's probably the big thing. Last thing on Latham though, do you think? And I know we talked about the positional flexibility. If they draft him, where is he playing in training camp? Do you think they're giving him both left tackle and right tackle just to be that first one who goes down? Do you think they're giving him anything in guard? Do you think they just stick him at right tackle? Do you think they try to stick him at left?
I think it's probably split left tackle, right tackle, like 50-50.
Right. All right. Who's 4 on your big board? So we got Harrison Jr., Neighbors, Latham. Who's number 4?
So we have Harrison. I would say probably Fashanu at 4. I probably put Fashanu at 4, and then this is where it comes like, okay, Latham and Fashanu are gone. I'm going to put Odunze there. I would take Odunze over the other guys.
What don't you like about Odunze?
Route running. He has a lot of work to do in terms of his releases. I don't know if I ever saw him beat press cleanly. Now there's numbers out there that indicate that he has success against press coverage, but the success against press coverage comes because he just absolutely mosses guys at the catch point. It's not because he beats a guy and stacks him and is outrunning him by 30 yards. So he has good athleticism. He's smooth. He's relatively explosive for his size, crazy vertical, ridiculous ability to adjust his body in the air. His contested catch ability is legitimately ridiculously good. But he has a lot of work to do in terms of being a overall good route runner at the NFL level, committing to breaks and stuff like that. There's some dead time at the top of his breaks. Focus drop. He had a focus drop or two. It's not a problem for him. Blocking. There's some instances of him lighting a guy up, and there's instances of him being a little bit lazy. So, but overall, I would say just nuance of route running for Odunze, but has a really high ceiling in terms of his athleticism. So I would say he is that's 5 for me right at that point.
Yes.
Actually, I apologize because we have alt, right? So yeah, I would put Fashanu, alt, okay, then Odunze, and then what we have Fuaga and Fatanu, as the last 2, I believe.
Yeah.
I guess
Bowers.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Bowers. So then after Odunze, I would put Bowers, and that's just because he's a question mark. I think he could be good. I would put him next after those guys, and I would say Fatanu, just because I haven't watched him enough, and like he's a wild card, and maybe he could play tackle. Where I'm pretty convinced that Fuaga should play guard. So I would say Fatanu, and then Fuaga last.
And then of course the Jets will take Brian Thomas Jr. So that's
and a trade down, which again is like, it sounds nice, but like he's a height, weight, speed guy who could just easily, he could easily bust as well. So it's a thing where, again, it's about the quality you're putting in each position, not just filling the spot, because that's what people are obsessed with all these like mock draft database stuff, mock draft, bullshit. So
just to recap, you have number 1, Marvin Harrison Jr., number 2, Neighbors, and you have a bit of a gap. You have Latham as probably the best option at 10, Fashanu, alt, Odunze, Bowers, Fatanu, Fuanga. That's Joe Blewett's big board, and Michael and I will be referring to that for the next 15 days or 14 days or whatever it is.
Yeah, 14 days.
Yeah. All right, Michael, you got anything else for Blewett before we get out of here? I know we have a lot that we do want to talk to you about like the team, Rodgers, Brees, whatever, but we'll do that later. We'll do that another day.
Yeah, we have months and months and months until the
months
season starts.
to obsess over Kenny Yeboah film. But Michael, anything else before you do the plugs and get out of here?
So with the new uniforms coming in 4 days, looks like we might get a third alternate.
You said 3 words the whole podcast.
That new rule. Would you rather see the Namath era throwbacks or the New York Titans throwbacks?
Titans of New York, if we're being...
Yeah, so I actually, so let me, again, I'll finish my statement, so don't audibly gasp. I don't hate the Titans uniform, the white on yellow. The blue on yellow, I don't like.
Hit the soundbite.
Which one? You blew it! There we go. I can't even hear it when I do that, but there you go. Or we can do this one. It's going to be a little bit too long. I don't know if I can mute it. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I would say I don't hate the white on yellow, but I definitely would bring back like the Namath, or even like, which Namath is kind of similar feel to the Jets of like the mid 2000s,
Chad Pennington,
and then it eventually changed from Reebok to Nike, and Nike screwed it all up.
Yeah, made it.
So I would say like pre Nike Reebok Jets jerseys, I would love those. But then are they able to have black though with that though, right? Because they have 3 helmets, right?
Yeah,
and
you can have 4 uniforms and 3 helmets.
Oh, okay. So it's 4 uniforms and 3 helmets. Yeah. So I would love white, green, black, and then a throwback to the to like the pre 2010-ish Jets, whenever that exactly. I think
so if you do that,
13?
Yeah, they wore Nike's first year was 2012. So 98, I think, was the first year they switched to 2011. Those era of uniforms. And actually, I think Nike may have had it at the whatever. They may have had it at the very beginning of like the Curtis Martin, whatever. Are you saying you throw it back to like that era with the green face mask and the hunter green, or are you saying like let's go with the Super Bowl 3 with the gray face masks, the retro numbers? I mean, you already have kind of a retro primary uniform, so maybe you don't want to get too.
Yeah, I would say if they are going to wear those jerseys, like I like when they wore those jerseys and they had the white helmet, white face mask.
Oh, so you're going to throw back to the 2016 Todd Bowles, Sam Darnold, like Lions debut?
Yes, but
that's our legacy
with the non-shitty Nike version and the Reebok version of that. That's what I would say is like the jersey I miss the most. Like those jerseys were like super, super clean. Now whether they do it like green, white, whatever it may be, I don't know what it would be.
Go white.
It's just okay. Yeah. So
they have the black.
Then it comes then they have 2 green jerseys. Like does that make enough impact? I think in terms of like selling jerseys, they probably go like back to like a Titans throwback.
No, they should go with the white, and then it's throwback to Super Bowl 3, the most iconic moment in this franchise's history. Like, right? Like that's my idea is you have and also my dad has a big problem with this because they keep calling these like the legacy uniforms. And he's like, what legacy are we talking about here?
Yeah.
He's like, I watched them. They were terrible with these. Like, he doesn't have the same nostalgia with this 80s. Like, he likes to name it the era uniforms because he's like a little bit older. And then like you have the guys who are like, who grew up and the Jets were were with the sack exchange or whatever. It's like, they have that nostalgia, but for him, like the name it there uniforms are the best uniforms. So I was like,
because they carry the most, they carry the most weight because they wanted them. But in terms of like the aesthetics of it, it's I love like the Jets with the swoosh type deal that we're most likely.
No, I agree. So. I've argued with it, and I think. Do you think they changed the helmet at all?
Well, what was it like? We had black and green face mask, right? We had green and what was it? It was a green and green face. What was the face mask color last year? The green helmet. Green and green.
No, sorry, it's black. Sorry, it's black with the green helmet.
And black.
Green with the black helmet. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I don't really care. Like the helmet, it could be green, it could be white. I really prefer white face mask. So like I think white face mask really pop. So that's my preference. That's the thing I'm looking out for is the color of the face mask.
Just the important stuff on this podcast. Of course, my video is frozen, so now we'll just translate into. We'll just use the the graphic for the last 2 minutes of this podcast.
There you go.
Blewett, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, spending 90 minutes with us, going over these prospects. Nobody better. I highly recommend anybody who listens to us, if they're not already, definitely make sure to check out Joe Blewett's stuff. Blewett's Blitz. I mean, I'll give you the opportunity if you want to do the plug yourself, but just make sure you go to Jets X Factor's YouTube and look at his film reviews for these prospects because you're going to find a level of detail that you're just not going to find anywhere else or with any other draft analyst. And you have original opinions here. Like Joe Alt is a certified bust and he wouldn't take him in the 3rd or 4th round, which is pretty sure what I heard.
Exactly what I said. Yep.
Yeah. Blue, I'll give you the opportunity to plug your own show, whatever you got in the pipeline.
Yeah, obviously Jets X Factor. That's where we're all kind of based out of. Joe RB31 on Twitter. I put up some plays on there. Like you said, Jets X Factor YouTube. I do a live stream every Friday from 6 to 8, and then catch reviews. Like I said, a lot of my opinions are not just parroted; they're built, they're original, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. I would say, like Nania, I think Nania said decent. I think I would better hit rate than not. So
I remember you really selling me on Quinn Williams back in the day. It was the
Quinn
Williams Josh Allen debate, and I mean they both
that guy was a bust,
good.
Right? Quinn Williams was a bust.
Oh yeah. Well, both those guys. Who was the other guy? It was Quinn and Josh Allen.
Brian Burns,
Cleveland.
Wow, so
Ed Oliver
really couldn't have gone wrong there. Ed Oliver, that was the guy.
Ed Oliver was in that one.
Pretty solid too. I mean,
but definitely not as good. No. Yeah, so just follow me there, and then again, if you want to disagree, I'm fine with that. I hate disagreements that are just like baseline level, like no, dude, he's good, you suck. Like that, I'm never gonna answer to that stuff. If you want to say like, hey, play 13, I thought this or that, like I'm much more willing to react with that and have a conversation. But all the draft talk and stuff like that, all the opinions on social media are driving me crazy. So I cannot have the next 14 days could not be go by quicker.
All right. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. Michael Nania, and myself, Ben W. Blessington. Go to Jets X Factor's YouTube. Best place to go for Jets content. I think my video is coming back now slowly. Now I'm just a black screen. All right.
There you go.
Oh, we're back. Look, the beautiful mustaches. I have the Aaron Rodgers mustache, and Nania has the Mark Sanchez playoff beard going on. I shaved the goatee, but I think next time I should bring out the Rodgers Fu Manchu. Or I guess that's name is Fu Manchu. But
I had the Fu Manchu for a little while.
Yeah, I don't know. You rate, review, subscribe. That helps us. Blewett, last thing. I think I got first round on you in the MetLife parking lot 2 years ago against the Ravens.
I don't think we should discuss this until you actually say what happened in the second one, and even the first one.
Both of us said I think we had just shotgun to beat. I vaguely remember. Okay, I remember I did beat your friend. Your friend who was like the size of J.C. Latham was like, let's do a press rep. I forget his name. I think he had the overalls on. I don't know. He was a big guy at your tailgate. And I was like, all right, dusted him. I looked like Robbie Anderson. Michael Nania at quarterback, though, was having a rough day. But I did win the route. And then me and you went up against each other. And I think I know Nania had a rough rep. I'm pretty sure I had like the speed versus Sauce Gardner rep against you where it was like 7 or 8 seconds. So, if the Jets drafted a good offensive lineman, that pass would have been completed. But otherwise, I think Nania got sacked. But I did win the first rep against you. Remember, that was a nice play.
Nania also got sacked. In that one.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure about that. But
I think Nania remembers.
What's your recollection of this tailgate matchup?
I could tell you, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, you were getting hammered or whatever, but like I think we went over to Let's Talk Jets Tyson's, and I did like, and this was before however much we drank before that, which you guys go to the tailgates, you see how we get after it. So we're getting after it for like 2 hours. Went to Tyson's. I think I did like 2 shots with Tyson, and then pressed you. You caught the ball on me. It was contested. It was after about 12 and a half seconds.
Oh, okay. I think your perception of time is a little off there.
Probably like 6.
It's like 5 seconds. Maybe 6.
That's pretty.
Maybe 6.
That's
yeah,
long.
It was a long round.
And then the recollection of last time, you created a little bit of separation. I'm pretty sure I was within arm's reach of you, and I would have played through your eyes, and that ball was not going to get completed. And again, Nani is probably sacked anyway. So in my mind, if
I was Brock Bowers, I would have geared down for that ball, and maybe I would have had a chance at it. But yeah, Michael threw it like I was running 2 miles an hour. Real
NFL level, you're realistically probably 0 for 2, but it's okay. And then we know what happened to Nania. Nania did not get off the line really. So it's. The
next time
I'm still waiting for your official, apology, because you talked up the first one a lot, and then I listened to the next podcast like, oh, you better talk about it. Nothing, right. 0.
Well, I think something had happened, Joe Blewett, that may have taken our attention away from what happened in the parking lot beforehand.
It's okay.
What's so tragic about that night too is I remember. Because you were like the section over from Michael and I. Mm-hmm. And I remember before the game, I think it's before they even did, it might have been after the intros, but before the game started, I remember looking over at you and you had the overalls, you're like blackout drunk. And we're just like, yeah, let's go. We did a Jets chant from like 2 sections across. And then like 5 minutes later, I tried to look over it. I think you posted on your Twitter was just like sad. Like it was just.
That
was a dark
That was
day.
The worst. I've had season tickets for quite a few years. I flew to Dallas the next week to see them get their shit kicked in. But it's okay, Glenn. It's no grind, no class. It's fine. It's just, I'm really questioning who your character. So
part 3 is going to be whoever the schedule comes out in a month. We'll do it. I'll be their home opener. We'll get the part 3 in there.
Okay.
Michael, I would start warming up the arm. I will say, in Michael's defense, and next time we have Morstead on, we're going to do this because I think it was the Dolphins-Jets game. Michael and I went to the kickoff area, like where you kick a field goal, and I had maybe the worst kick. I mean, I like completely snapped my ankle doing it because I just had an ankle thing, and it was bad. But I dirted the ball immediately. Michael, right through the uprights.
Oh, nice. There you go.
Michael was right through the uprights.
I went in the Cowboys field a couple. I think I kicked the minimum field you can kick, but I was 1 for 1 in Dallas on their field, so I was excited.
All right, we'll have Morstead review our kicks, but yes, week 1 rematch, part 3, the trilogy. All right,
that's fine.
All right, thank you everybody for listening. Have a great week. Go Jets.